So every single scholarship that is registered in this way gets found by FastWeb and vetted by FastWeb, and then put up. You go in there, you make an account, you put in as many things that apply to you as you can, and then it'll start pulling. It's a search engine. It'll start pulling and sending you scholarships. Okay, here's a couple of things. People like, oh, I'll do this because it doesn't require an essay, or I'll do this one because it's fun or whatever. It's a waste of time. You're trying to get the most money for how much work you put into it, right? So those ones that don't have essays and things like that, 100,000 people will apply to it. The chances of you winning is very low, and you still have to fill out the application. And usually what it is you sign up for it, and then they just send you a bunch of email and try and sell you things. So there's a reason why. There's no such thing as free money per se. Free for free, right? The ones that you want to get are what they call renewables. Renewable scholarships. You just don't get it once, but you get it every single year you're enrolled as a full-time student. So this is great, right? You fill out an application. If you win it, they'll give you $5,000 this year, $5,000 next year. They're usually up to 5 years. So that's $25,000 for one application. The applications tend to be more in depth because they're giving you $25,000. But if you spend an hour to fill out an application and it earns you $25,000, that's a good payoff, right? If it takes you 3 days to complete the application and it gives you $25,000, that's still good, because how long will it take you to work to earn $25,000? By the way, this $25,000 that they give you is tax-free. So it goes directly to your accounts, and it'll either go to your bank account, or it will go directly into to your school and pay off whatever amount that you owe. A full ride to college will always have about $3,000 a year that you owe, and that's because they call skin in the game. When they gave kids full ride, kids didn't value it and didn't do as well. If they have to pay some amount of money, they do better. $3,000 for a year is way cheaper than it costs for you to live home with your parents for a year, right? Because if you're like, oh my God, $3,000, that's so much for my parents. It's like, that's way cheaper than it would be if you lived at home and ate things, right? Because that $3,000 covers your housing, your food, your furniture, all your classes, your material, your shampoo, an occasional boba, right? So the $3,000 is never, it's meant to cover your personal expenses, which is your transportation and your shampoo and pizza money. $3,000 is really easy. I mean, if you work minimum wage, that $3,000 though is out there. So you should be looking, if that's a hardship and you're gonna have to earn your own $3,000, then that's $3,000 times 3, that's 12 times 4 for 4 years, that's $12,000 you have to have. That's the total cost of you going to college. Now, most private scholarships cover that $3,000, and that's what I'm talking about now. So those renewable $5,000 a year scholarships will cover your $3,000 buy-in and then give you a little bit more bonus. The biggest cost I think kids have beyond the $3,000 is if you study abroad 1 year, which all of you probably would want to do. If you study abroad a semester, you need to buy the plane flights. Some of you won't. The better schools that you go to, they'll cover your plane flights, but like UC doesn't cover your plane flights. So, and UC won't buy your luggage, and UC, public schools versus private schools is what's the difference. So, it kind of costs maybe an extra $3,000 to study abroad per year, but then you get to study for a semester in Italy, or you get to study a semester in Hong Kong, or you get to study it. The one that everybody wants is a semester in Dubai, because that's amazing. The most popular study abroads are Seville, Spain, Paris, Dubai, and Florence, Italy is where people would like to go for a semester, because amazing, right? I mean, also, by the way, study abroad is easier than regular school, and your grades still count. So people can put up big grades and have a good time in the whole country. And then it also kind of it looks good on your resume as you go and apply to colleges because then you have like global experience. Okay, so remember in the back of your mind when it's Lunar New Year, it's like, oh my God, Sally told me that around this time we need to fill out the FAFSA. There are FAFSA workshops at your high schools, and you can go in and do it with your high school counselors. Just make sure that you do it before the deadline. Now, those of you who are applying to private schools, however, all of you will be going early, which means that by November 1, that means you have to fill out your FAFSA before October. So within the next month, you have to fill it out because your financial aid package is determined. So you turn in your, what's nice about applying early decision is you turn in your application in November, and then they tell you mid-December whether or not you got in or not. So if you get in, then you're just done. You're officially a second semester senior, and also they will tell you your financial aid package. I want to talk about what early decision means. So there's early decision and early action. One, if you get in, you commit to going. If you get in, you go. The only way you can get out of it is if they don't give enough money, but they always give their biggest packages, so there's barely anybody who doesn't go, right? If you apply, there's a second one that's non-binding, meaning that you can apply, they'll let you know if you get in, but you're not required to go. You could choose, you can still apply to other schools and go to other places. It's just that you would have that in your back pocket. You haven't already in acceptance. Now people are like, why would I ever go binding, right? Because there are a lot of people who know, like, if I get in Stanford, I'm going. If I get into Harvard, I'm going. I'm really not going to apply anywhere else. If I get in, I'm going. And those are the people who should apply binding. There are some people who, the thing is the ones that's binding has the most favorable for the student admissions practices. Meaning, for the top schools, the best admissions odds are early decision binding. So if you know that's where you want to go and you apply, and if you get in, you'll go, that's where you want to apply. If you are unsure, then you apply early decision where you're not binding. And then if you totally don't know, you apply regular decision. So you have descending, however, like your most favorable admissions conditions are early decision binding. Your least favorable is regular decision. On most of the top colleges, and this doesn't apply to UC, but most of the top colleges, they will take the gross majority of their students' early decision binding. Why? Because of that USA World and News report. The USA World and News report, remember I showed you, is it still in here? It has the rankings of all the schools I was telling you. Jackie, can you get it up on the screen? The reason why UC's dropped so far in the rankings is for two reasons. What they call matriculation numbers, or their yields, how many people you took and how many people actually showed up and went. What they discovered about UC's is it has low yields. They take a lot of people, but a lot of people don't go. So in other words, despite UC Berkeley being highly competitive to get into, if people who apply to UC Berkeley also get into Stanford, Yale, Harvard, MIT, Georgetown, Duke, any of those other schools, people tend to go to the other schools, so their yields were low. The second reason UC dropped in the numbers and then the rankings is because people were having a hard time graduating out in 4 years. It was taking longer because people couldn't get home to their classes. And the third reason why they dropped in the rankings is that because of impaction, there's certain majors you can't apply into. It dropped in the rankings because you can't necessarily graduate out in the thing that you want to graduate out in. So does that mean that those schools are somehow lesser? No, but there's those challenges exist there, right? Let's see. So, by the way, the top, I don't believe in rankings, and I believe in rankings. In order to sell the magazine, the school can't be the top school every year, so they have to kind of change the criteria a little bit every year. So certain schools change up and down in the rankings. Basically, it comes out in a magazine. You just want to try and be in the top 50 schools. And if you have an unweighted 3.85 or above, you are in the running for the top 10% of schools. If you have 3.95 or 4 unweighted, you're in the running for the top 3% schools. Here's what it is. People, all the time, there's like people like, oh my God, the kid went to Lowell and he had a 5-point something GPA and he took all these APs and he still didn't get in. Most of the time it's because their essays suck. I read terrible essays from really top students, and it's kind of sad, but not sad, because I weeded out kids that have nothing to say, right? You don't, if you get to a school and you earned it and you had lots to say, whatever, and I take another kid that has nothing to say, I'm actually screwing over your education. So I'm actually trying to protect, not, because I don't know the applicants from Adam, right? They're just who I'm taking in. I'm just trying to put together a class of the most incredible people I can put next to each other in a group. I'm going to search around the country for people who have interesting points of view and interesting backstories and come from completely different points of origin in order, because I'm going to put them right next to each other and I'm going to ask them to work together and come up with ideas. So the kid that had 4-point everything and whatever, but who can't write an essay and who's, oftentimes the letter recommendations on those kids are not great either. They say, he earned an A in my class. This was a really tragic letter recommendation I got last year. It was like, yeah, this kid earned an A in my class. If you asked me to pick his voice out, I wouldn't be able to. And I don't think he's ever contributed to a class discussion. And he point blank say, but my school no longer allows me to count discussion as part of the grade due to new grading rubrics. So the kid has an A, but if I was grading on a rubric that included discussion points, the kid would have a B-. Thank you, right? That's a great thing for me to know. Because I don't want that. And because if I put them next to whoever in here who is smart and can do those things, my school only gets better when I have all the unicorns in one room, right? And the more unicorns I have, and the more unicorns that I find and place, the more power I have to make better and better communities. So some of you last night came with me to meet Johnny Eck, who's on the board of directors of Pomona College, which is harder to get into than Stanford right now. And it's one of the top 3% schools in the country. And you heard him, right? He's not that different than you, and in terms of experience, is Latinx and Indigenous, but has a similar experience. But how seamlessly he can articulate his experiences is incredible, right? He didn't know what you were going to ask him, and he can flow it, and he can pull it, and use his English. So I want to create a class of Johnny X, right? By the way, it's not X, his last name is E.K. It's an Indigenous last name. Okay. So let's look at Princeton. So they're saying Princeton is the #1 school here. By the way, if you see that building in the background? So Princeton, Vassar, Yale all have a very similar building because it is based on Oxford and Cambridge in England that have a building that looks remarkably like that. Yale and Vassar have identical libraries that look like that, except for Yale's is 6 feet taller than Vassar's. Does anyone want to take a guess as to why? It's gross and irritating. Men. Nice. Vassar was an all-women's school, and Yale was an all-men's school. They were brother and sister schools. In order to assert dominance, when they built both libraries, they built Yale's library 6 feet taller than Vassar's because that's the average height of a man, so that we would always know that they were above us. Just like I can't. The idea that somebody was just like, hey, you know what we should do? I mean, like, that's just nuts. Like, the level of patriarchy that exists within higher education is gross. Oh, and the other thing about our library, the steps, the marble steps in Vassar's library versus Yale's libraries are different to enable women with hoop skirts, you know, those giant skirts and bustles, because that's the period of time in the Gilded Age when these schools came into being, could walk up the stairs and still remain chaste. They didn't want women to be putting their leg up too high because that's the separation of your thighs, and that was considered unladylike. So the stairs are slightly different so that when you walk up the stairs, your thighs don't separate. Which is really stupid because for me, it's like I had a lot of classes in the top. I would just have to run up a lot of little tiny stairs to get somewhere. And then when I went to Yale, I was like, okay, these are normal stairs. Like, I don't know. I just didn't feel like my thighs had anything to do with me getting to class, but they do at Ivy League institutions. Okay, so Princeton's number 1, MIT is number 2. So MIT is actually called Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but it's never referred to that way. It is referred to as MIT. Okay, so you'll look at the corner over there, and you'll see tuition and fees, $59,000. 60,000. Okay, so why am I always quoting that it costs about 80,000 to go to these schools? Because that's just tuition and fees. That doesn't include you eating anything or any of your housing, any of your transportation, any of your books, any of your labs, any of your equipment you need to like not catch yourself on fire in the chem lab. So be careful when you're comparing prices. People will say, oh, UC's only $17,000 and or $40,000 and MIT is $80,000. Why would I go there? Well, you're comparing numbers that are apples to apples because you're including one that has housing and food and your lab fees and everything, and one you're only doing tuition, right? So make sure that you're doing that. You'll hear this a lot in your families. People will say, oh, it's much cheaper, look at the numbers. And they're looking at not comparable numbers. So make sure you're always looking at comparable numbers. Also, Princeton, when you consider that your money you invest doubles every 7 years, so are we ready for some more math? We're here? Are we ready for some math? If I invest $1,000, right, how much money will I have in 7 years? $2,000. Nice. Okay. So consider this. If I invested, because a lot of this was made out of cotton money. If I invested like $5 million in 1760, how much money will I have now? You can use a calculator. So do 2024 minus 1760 will take the number of years, right?
Is it like exponential? Like,
yeah, so you're doing compound interest. Do you know you guys all took higher level math, right?
Yeah.
So figure out how much money you would have now. So it doubles every 7 years, and then how many derivatives of 7 do you have between here and there?
How many?
$1 million. Or do 5 million. Because some of these things is actually like 25. So how much is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's in the billions, right?
I
So
mean, it's way
like
past-
Harvard University's, how much it has in its endowment is larger than a lot of countries' gross national products. So when they say the Harvard endowment is not $100 million. The Harvard endowment is in the billions of dollars. So that's why they can pay for more. So like UC right now is hundreds of millions of dollars in debt from the pandemic. But they always, because it's a public school, they're always making money, right? They don't need it all from your tuition because my tax dollars are going to fund the UCs, right? So they have 2 revenue streams. But when you're looking at things like this, like Princeton University, they have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. Stanford, so Princeton has a lot of money because they've been doing compounding their investments for several hundred years, and their original investment was huge, right? Even for today's standards. But so how does Stanford have a ton? Like Stanford is 100 years old. Like how did they manage to make money? Yes. No. Sort of, but no. Stanford bought, when it started, the Leland Stanford, the guy, bought all the land that is now Silicon Valley. So while you go through Silicon Valley, which is one of the most expensive like land in the world, and you drive around Palo Alto, the majority of that land is owned by Stanford. So all of those companies out there, Cisco, Apple, Microsoft, all of those companies have to pay rent to Stanford, right? And in the billions of dollars, and then their alumni. The alumni have not given billions of dollars, what the alumni have given is buildings. Because they started a ego competition amongst billionaires. So, like if you go, are you in the science squad? There's the Hewlett Packard building, there's the Jerry Yang building, there's the Gates building, and then there's the Jobs building, the Jobs building. Yeah. So every guy kind of, and there's a Wang building. Every guy who wanted to, I don't know, flex, bought it. So yes, you do get buildings, but buildings are kind of like, $50 million, right? A small building.
Yeah,
A big
some
building.
of the buildings.
Yeah, some of the buildings are probably $200 million.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of money. Stanford will lose $100 million. Wait, Stanford lost $100 million based on their stance on Gaza, and they stood by it. Okay. So, by the way, there are all these people who are like, oh, they're rich. They probably bought their way into Stanford. Yes and no, but somebody given $50,000 is not buying a place at Stanford. In order to buy, like at Vassar. Tricia Loeb, who I was talking about yesterday, I need $20 million. If you want to buy a space, it's going to cost you way more. So a lot of people are like, oh, all the Pacific Heights kids are buying their way into colleges. They're not. They don't have. Maybe 5 of them have that much money. But they're not. And when they had that big college admission scandal, remember there were rich kids in the Bay Area who were buying their way in. They didn't buy their way in through admissions. They bought their way in through athletics. They were paying off low-level coaches for admissions things. So, and they were trying to cheat it because they did try. And there's a Chinese guy who tried to buy his way into Stanford. He tried to do it through the coaches, and he actually made it through. But he tried to do it just legitimately by buying a building before, and he offered $25 million, and they turned him down. Okay. So, let's go down. So there's Harvard is number 3, keep going. Stanford is number 4. The amount of opportunity that's available there, it's unbelievable. And, by the way, guess what they don't ever get? Applications from Chinatown. Nobody from Chinatown ever applies to do. Which is funny, because they apply like crazy from everywhere else, but for some reason, people don't apply there or don't know about it. Okay, Brown is where my daughter went, and it's just here. It's in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm not sure what building it is. Mia would have to tell me. And it is the most liberal and social justice based of all the Ivy League schools. Okay, next. Johns Hopkins, it's in Baltimore. That's science. If you're pre-med, that's the place to go. It has one of the most prestigious pre-med programs, pre-nursing, anything that has to do with medical is Johns Hopkins. And it's also in Baltimore, which is beautiful. Next is Northwestern, which is outside of Chicago. Columbia, which is in the heart of New York City. If you want it, it's an Ivy League school. If you want it, Harvard and Columbia got hit bad with their stances on Gaza. Harvard lost its president. Columbia had to bring in 300 NYPD cops to quell its encampment rebellion. The whole slew of Columbia teachers left because of it. Harvard lost some of its most famous professors because of it, and for the first time in the history of American education, Harvard had a deep, deep dip in its applications. It was actually, they had their least competitive, they're always most competitive, like least competitive application season last year in the history of the university. Harvard has a lore around it because it's just the first university made in the United States, and so it has the longest history and has the most famous people who have been there, and it's highly competitive to get in. Is it any better than Columbia or Cornell? No. Okay, so Cornell is in New York. It's a lesser known Ivy. Going. University of Chicago, tremendous. And then here we are. Here's the first UC. It's ranked number 15. Here's UC Berkeley. And the Campanile is there. Okay, so let's look at the difference in numbers. 65,000 to go to University of Chicago, and then see tuition and fees is 48,000 for 65 out of state. You would be in state, so it's 15,891. And so people were like, "Oh my God, why would I go to the University of Chicago and not UC Berkeley, because it's going to cost me far, far less, like a fourth of what the other ones would." If you are a low-income person of color, right, and you're a first-generation college student, University of Chicago, if your parents make less than $100,000 a year, is free. That is not the case from UC Berkeley. So most of the times with a lot of my kids who get into private school, it's actually cheaper to go to an Ivy League school than it is to go to UC, because the threshold for aid is different. They all the schools that we just went through right now, the private schools, have what they call a no loan policy. So you'll see how much money you qualify for. Let's say you're not a good example. Let's say you're a middle class person, right? Your parents make $200,000 a year. So if you apply to the school and maybe you owe $10,000 a year, okay. And then you can say, I don't have $10,000 a year, I will have to take out loans, and they'll say, okay, well, we have a no loan policy, so we'll cover your loans. So if you fill out the FAFSA and they say your EFC is $10,000 and they offer you loans, they'll break it down, right? The school will cover your loans. So make sure that not all offers are the same. Sometimes it is cheaper to go to a UC. Just make sure that you're not making any decisions on where you're applying to school based on these numbers. Make sure you're making the decisions on where you're going to school based on the actual financial aid package you're offered. My last thing of advice too is that in everybody that I talk to that go to UC, please consider and factor in that you may have to take a 5th year, and also that you may have to take classes over the summer in order to graduate on time. So you're not, so in order to graduate in 4 years, it's like, how many classes did Tracy have to take over the summer?
Oh, this year?
Yeah, 2, okay. So Tracy had to take 2 classes over the summer in order to stay on track, right? So you have to factor in, she's low income enough, she doesn't have to pay for those classes, but she also could not get a full-time job or an internship that had, the ones that are paying $12,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 for the summer. She can't get one of those because she has to take the 2 classes in order to stay on track. So make sure that you're factoring these into this idea, because there's so many people who graduate out of UC owing a lot of money and having lean resumes and not having the ability to earn money over the summer. That counteracts. It would have been a better idea to go somewhere, even if they had to pay what seemed like more. You actually lose more where we go. So do apples to oranges. There are always people in this class who are like, it seems like Sally's pushing me to go to college, private colleges and all this stuff. I'm not. I'm just counteracting all the stuff that you know more about so that you can make better decisions about where you want to go. You have 0 knowledge of private schools. So I'm going to fill in that. I'm not going to fill in as much about UCs because you've been told that your whole life, right? I'm just trying to make it equal amount of knowledge. Okay, can you scroll it down? Okay, there's UCLA. Oh, it changed. UCLA came up a bunch of spots. That's nice. There's Rice. That school is really good in computer science and engineering. It is really hard. It's considered Pomona, Rice, and Reed are really hard. Like the graduates from there have skills, crazy skills. So if you want to go to a place where the most competitive students are going to be, and that's partially why Rice is down here, because a lot of kids leave and they go somewhere easier. Okay, Dartmouth, another Ivy League. Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is in Nashville, Tennessee. Fun town. Lots of money. It's the Vanderbilts of like Gloria Vanderbilt genes and the Vanderbilt family. It is a family who made it. And if any of you watch CNN, Anderson Cooper, their main news anchor, is a Vanderbilt. And that's there. Notre Dame. Keep going. It's the first one on this list that is religious. Notre Dame is a Catholic university, and while you don't have to be Catholic to go there, there is more of a Christian element to it. Here's your first non-UC public school, University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. Keep going. I'm trying to get to 30. Georgetown, if you're interested in political science, or you're interested in government, or you're interested